Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. We're just waiting on a few more people who are joining. And once they've, so we're just going to give it one more minute while everyone else is joining, and then we will kick off. Marcus, any logistics that I need to be aware of that I have missed out here?
If you're recording this, please don't share it with anybody else, just because of compliance and everything else. You're very welcome to record it for your own purposes. We are going to make it available to everybody, so it will be public domain, but just for best practice, don't share it. If you are going to share the final recording that we publish, you're welcome to do that, and then everyone's covered. Anything else logistics wise? This is going to be quite interactive. Remember, all of us are learning. Let's be honest, there aren't any experts out there apart from, well, there may be, but none on this call. We're all experimenting, so we're trying to learn together. Bits of it may turn into a little bit of a bloodbath if we're experimenting with some of the wrong questions. And in fact, we might even do that deliberately. We'll ask some bad questions to see where it takes us, because it's really important to understand just how the quality of the questions determines the quality of the answers. Bad questions, bad output. I think that's about it.
Yeah, so let's get started. So everyone, welcome to actually the second live session that we've hosted on ChatGPT for sellers. The first one is out. All you have to do is go to the Proverbial Door YouTube page, and you will find that first live recording up on there. In this particular one, we're going to be looking at something very interesting, which is the perspective of the buyer. So how are the buyers using ChatGPT in order to accelerate and take more control of their own buying process? And just like in the early 2000s, when that happened, guess what? Sellers found themselves in a situation where they had far less influence than they did before. And so we're going to be looking at that right now for today's session. But of course, the perspective of all of this is around what does this mean for sellers, and how can you as sales professionals, whether you are a quota bearer or whether you're a sales leader, how can you get ahead of that trend and start to use ChatGPT in a way that gives you incredible competitive advantage? So the outcomes for today's session. So today's session, we're going to structure this as Marcus said, very, very interactive. So it's not just going to be us talking all the time. We're going to be asking you questions. We're going to ask you, and please, if you can put your answers in the chat in the actual Zoom session rather than unmuting yourself. And what we'll also do is have a couple of polls up so that we can get a good idea of the individuals in the session today. Your answers will shape the direction for this conversation. So we're going to personalize it as much as possible to the consensus of the group. So today's outcomes. First thing, there are three things that we would hope that you take away from this. Number one is what really ChatGPT can do here. And as Marcus said, we're still learning. There's so much going on, and it's changing on a daily basis. I mean, I must have read about 15 different articles just today around how people have been testing ChatGPT in different ways and different formats. And so this is a rapidly advancing field. Number two is, again, how are your buyers using ChatGPT to take more control? And it's happening right now. We're seeing this, my discussion with buyers, my clients' discussions with buyers, Marcus's discussions with his own buyers and his clients' buyers. You know, we're seeing this happen already, and that's quite a scary thing. And when we realize what it is that they're doing, this is going to change the sales game in ways that are far more than, say, the early 2000s, when the internet kind of democratized access to information and created a distance between salespeople and those buyers. In fact, the influence, the sphere of our influence with them became so small quite fast. And I think AI is going to do this a lot faster. The third thing that we're going to look at are around the how you can use ChatGPT to kind of streamline your sales process. And it's incredible what it can do. And we're going to show you some of that, not just through the principles, but we're actually going to show that to you in a live demonstration. So before we go on to this particular slide, I'm going to throw up a poll and love to get your thoughts and your answers from this. So just want to make sure that, Marcus, can you see that poll in front of you?
I can see the poll.
Good. So if we can just take 30 seconds or so just to answer that question, if you can just tell us what is the biggest sales challenge that you're seeing right now? Then this could be for you as an individual salesperson. If you're a leader representing your team, then you may want to answer this as if it's your team. But we just want to get a quick understanding of where you're seeing are the biggest sales challenges at the moment. So we'll take about 20 seconds for those answers to come in. Okay, so we're seeing a couple more answers are still coming in. So I'm just going to give five more seconds for you to share your answers here. Okay. So let's see the results. Now that is interesting. So the highest, which that is not surprising actually. And the highest there is finding and reaching the right prospects. And we're hearing that across the board with anyone that we really speak with. What was the second one? So understanding the complexities of the buying process. Now we're going to be covering that today as part of today's session. And it'll be interesting to see how ChatGPT is going to impact that. There'll be some things that it accelerates, and some things where it just literally takes the salespeople and any of your marketing efforts out of the game. And I know how scary that sounds, but that seems to be at least the intention, or at least the message that's being communicated. The influence of that is going to be so small that the question is going to be, well, what next? How do we change the way that we communicate with buyers? And when do we do that? And with what message and with what impact are we trying to resonate? So very interesting that came up, and that's something that we will cover. And then the next one is a tie between establishing trust, which is a perennial challenge that we're hearing, managing stress and burnout, which is becoming increasingly important. And one of the amazing stats that we're seeing around ChatGPT at the moment is just how much time ChatGPT can save in some tasks that are very important, but can also be quite laborious as well. And so we're seeing just how much how effective and efficient ChatGPT can make that process. So very interesting there. Marcus, any thoughts on those answers there? Anything to add?
It's not really a surprise. I'm delighted that you're not facing or struggling with objection handling, because I'm sure most of you are preventing them from happening in the first place. And I think the worry a lot of people have about finding and reaching the right prospects is often caused because they're looking in the wrong time frame. And they're spending their time chasing short-term prospects and trying to find the 3% that are in the market to buy what you have immediately, instead of cultivating the 40% who are likely to be in the market at some point in your medium to long term. And at some point in the conversation, I definitely want to bring in a couple of you guys. So Dustin, for one, I'm just trying to see who else is there. Luke, and Nigel, be very curious what you guys are doing over your neck of the woods. And the managing stress and burnout is really more about prioritization. More often than not, what matters is what you say no to, not what you say yes to. And one of the things I really love about this tool is its ability to help us start to prioritize and make better decisions. But be really careful that it's down to the quality of the questioning and building that library so that you give it very good prompts. Don't just take the first response. That's my lesson so far.
Yeah. So let's cover some of those things now. So quick question that I want to share with everyone, and that's not a picture of Marcus. That's just a random photo that I took from the internet. So a quick quiz for everyone, just to kind of share something very interesting here. So in the chat, and if you can write in the chat, can anyone guess as to the average IQ? The IQ of an average person in the West, right? And by IQ, we think of this as horsepower in order to actually come to a logically analyze, assimilate information to come to a conclusion and make a decision. So can anyone guess as to what is the IQ of an average person who has grown up in the West? So 120, 100, 110, 120, someone in there with a 5. So that's someone that's pessimistic there about the human ability. So if they voted for, okay, great. And so there's some very optimistic individuals here. So the number is 90. Now, this gentleman here, Albert Einstein, does anyone like to guess as to the theorized IQ of this gentleman, or estimated IQ of this gentleman? 160, 180, 167 to 180. That's very specific. Yeah, 150. Okay, so it's 160 to 180. Now, this young man here is older than the picture, but would anyone like to guess as to his IQ? So what I mean by that is the highest ever recorded IQ. Would anyone like to guess what that might be? $200, 208, that's very specific. 190, 200. Okay, 210. So this young man, I cannot remember his full name, but his first name is Anan, 263, right? Now, can anyone guess as to the calculated AI right now of AI in existence in terms of the IQ or the horsepower of AI right now? Can anyone guess as to not the exact number, but how many times more than the IQ of an average person? So how many times more IQ than the average person does AI have? So we've got 4 to 5 times, we've got 10 times, 20, 80. Okay, 100. So it's not 5 times, it's not 50, right? It's not 100, 1,000. It is actually recorded at 1 million times than the IQ of an average person. 1 million. Now, put that into context. Albert Einstein is responsible for some of the most amazing advances in human development. GPS, theory of relativity, etc. So many amazing things that this person has done. And he is just under 2.5 times or so of the average person. But AI is 1,000,000 times in terms of horsepower. So not intelligence, including emotional intelligence or any of those things. This is purely horsepower, right? So what we mean by that is, if you take the definition of IQ, it's your ability to, it's measuring your reasoning ability. Now, reasoning ability is your ability to assess things in a rational way by applying logic-based kind of information in terms of new and existing information in order to make a decision, right? So it's rationally applying logic based on new or existing information to make a decision. So that's kind of giving you the context as to how powerful AI is. And what's even more amazing is that you have that at your fingertips right now, and for free, right? Now, there are paid versions, etc., with bells and whistles, but you actually have access to that amazing horsepower at your fingertips for free. And the question now is, what do you do with it? So I just wanted to give you some context behind, how much of a resource you have right now and how much of potential ChatGPT can actually help you in the areas that you're kind of interested in doing. So whether that's sales, but it doesn't have to be sales. We've heard of ChatGPT helping people write, code and do some amazing things. So let's talk about how buyers are taking control. And this is an area that's quite contentious. It's scary, but nonetheless, it's happening right now. So first thing is some of the ways that buyers are using. So the first one is product research. So they are researching, your products, or at least the category of products, by using ChatGPT on their own. They don't really need to access vendor information anymore, less access or requirement for vendor information. This is now more about vendor confirmation. So if you think it's bad enough where someone will approach you and ask you as part of an RFP process, for example, here are the requirements we have. Tell us if you can do this or not. And they would send that to maybe 3 or 4 suppliers. What's happening now is there's talk around, well, do we actually need to do that anymore? Are we not going to get 90%? So you may not even have a chance to sit at the table. You may not even been shown the door or even the chair to do so. That's the trend for where this is going. And that's the kind of conversations that we're hearing from buyers at the moment. So instead of just order taker, you're becoming even more into the order taker side of the spectrum and far, far less influence. So we saw the research from Gartner around when a buyer contacts a vendor, they're probably about 57% of the way through their purchasing process, their buyer's journey.
It's good, isn't it? Like it? Lovely. Beautiful.
So Christine, you're coming through there. So if you could place yourself on mute, please. Thank you. So that's the first scary thing. Let's look at the next one, which is it's not just product research. So think about it this way. Think of product research as CRM research, right? Now we're talking about vendor research. And it's not just vendor research through the internet that we're all used to. It's opinions about those vendors that they're going to get access to. So your reputation, your customer experience, they can actually interrogate ChatGPT to understand, what is the SWOT of each type of vendor? What are the things that we should be looking out for? What are the tough questions that we should be asking them? I've been playing around with Bing, and the new Bing platform has the ability to do both ChatGPT and internet search, and you can start to merge those two together, which is absolutely incredible. So they no longer need your information to actually be able to assess you. Theoretically, they don't need to go to a third party. There were instances where, as salespeople, you can build trust by helping them actually provide them with validated information to compare the different vendors out there. Well, it looks like ChatGPT can do a lot of that for them, right? So they're looking for timely and accurate information about vendors. You can certainly help with that, but bear in mind they're doing a lot of that research on their own. The next thing that they're doing is negotiation strategies. And this was a big one. So we have, Marcus and I have a mutual partner, a colleague that we work with very closely. And back in the 90s, he hired, I think it was something like 5 or 10 people out of India in
20.
order to 20, right? So 20 people out of India, 20 people in India to analyze and reverse engineer the costing of a particular type of solution and to understand all the different layers of the costing structure so that they can understand how to better negotiate a deal, or at least expect how buyers might negotiate a particular deal. Well, ChatGPT can do that very quickly. So it can research, things like the market rates. Now it doesn't, and most people will say, well, hang on a second, it's not accurate, it's not up to date. But here's the thing with cognitive bias. It doesn't need to be accurate or up to date. It's just got to give the feeling of confidence. And feeling is a very critical part of the decision-making process. And when you look at the neuroscience of decision-making, you will have behavior, thought, feelings, emotions, then perception. And so just elevating that sense of confidence in their feeling can greatly skew the how you kind of perceive the accuracy of information. So they will look at things like market rates. They will look at things like contract terms. What are the contract terms out there? How can I run a scenario, for example, that if I negotiate these types of contract terms, is that something that's deliverable? What is the salesperson likely to come back with? So they can actually prepare themselves for what it is that you're likely going to say. And all with the idea of squeezing you, right? I know that people talk about a win-win scenario, but for them, that ratio or that perspective of win is going to be greatly bigger than what it used to be, which means that it's going to feel a lot more like you're losing out and a lot more like them winning as well. So that's the third thing. Now, the final one there is, they're going to use ChatGPT to give them customized recommendations. So before they've talked about products, before they've talked about vendor, before they've talked about negotiation, all those things, they're doing what I call, decision-making agency. And the best salespeople are those who are decision-making agents. So what does that mean? Well, if I have a problem, such as, let's take a sales problem, which is I have a problem with sales growth. You could hire more people, you could increase quota, you can buy technology, you can improve training so that you're improving the quality of conversations. There's a whole raft of options open to you and levers that you can pull in order to improve sales output. So the question then for the buyers is, well, what are the options that we need to consider? And guess what? You can use ChatGPT to actually help them make those decisions. So if you thought it was hard enough to get a seat at the table, guess what? It's even harder now because you may not even be within their sphere of consideration. So they may not even be thinking about CRM, for example. They might be thinking about something completely different. And if you're a CRM provider, well, guess what? You're pushed out of even the consideration process. Please
go ahead, make a quick point? I was on a call yesterday. We were doing a customer interview with Jill Robbins, and she's a very influential procurement specialist. She's regularly cited in the top 50 worldwide. And what was really interesting was how they're using it to help them understand the gaps in their own understanding of their contracts, on service levels, on rebates, and on performance levels, time to value. And if you are not on the ball, they're going to be taking you over the coals at renewal. And you're going to have to come up with really good ideas, because if you don't, your competition are going to be using this to just get the foot in the door. And for those of us who are using it, I don't think we've even scraped the surface of its potential. And I'm thinking about this, in the agricultural revolution, you had about 2,000 years to catch up. With the industrial revolution, you had a couple of hundred. the internet came along and you had about 15 to 20. And you're still, there's still companies out there that don't have a website. And then you've got this. And I think you've got about 4 months, because by the time you realize in a year, your market's already going to have been taken from underneath you, and your customers will have been sourcing your other suppliers and getting better deals. So I think this is where we have to really start thinking ahead.
Yeah. And this question of what do we do as salespeople and what does that mean? Well, if you look at the buyer's journey, firstly, it's understanding the buyer's journey in its entirety. I think the question of whether people need to understand the buyer's journey, and believe it or not, there's a whole bunch of companies out there that don't really have a handle on the buyer's journey. It's very surface level. Well, guess what? I don't think anymore that's going to be an excuse, and that's going to cut it. We're going to have to be even more intimately aware about what's going on in that buying journey, and how ChatGPT is going to be used as a resource as part of that whole process. So this area of being timely, of being relevant, and of being valuable becomes even more important in terms of the interactions that we have. And so when you look at, and this is quite a busy slide, so let me just direct you to a couple of things here that's going to be important for you. So the first thing is, if you're looking at the buyer's journey, if you look at where sales is involved, you can see that sales is really, really involved, and we tend to get involved at this stage here. Marketing will be involved at these first 2 levels, but the problem is that there is a chasm between marketing and sales. I think we can safely say that in terms of majority, marketing do not talk very well with sales, and sales vice versa do not talk very well with marketing. We don't understand each other. And in fact, marketing often are being pigeonholed into a particular type of demand generation, when actually they could be doing so much more. And there's very little cross-pollination or feedback of insights between sales and marketing, especially as sales are at the very front end and the very sharp end of where the company touches the marketplace and touches the buyers. So what we're looking at in terms of this area here is, how can ChatGPT actually impact all of the touch points across the whole buyer's journey? And so this becomes incredibly important if you want to be able to use ChatGPT in the right way, because if buyers are using ChatGPT already to kind of inform themselves at first thought, if they're looking at kind of educating themselves and understanding what's going on out there, well, the question then becomes, are we present at those moments? And are we having the right level of influence with them? And guess what? ChatGPT can actually make that incredibly, incredibly easy for you to do, or at least open the doorways to understanding that in a far more comprehensive way. So I think I've been talking about this for a bit too long now. I don't want to dominate the conversation. I want this to be as interactive as possible. I thought Marcus and I thought that this would be a good moment actually to demonstrate how you can ask ChatGPT some of those questions in order to understand, how are the buyers thinking about solving a particular challenge that you're involved with, and really touching on that buyer's journey as well. So Marcus, should we show an example or show a demo of how this would play out and how salespeople can use this?
Yeah, I need to be able to share my screen, so I'm in there now, and off we go. Hang on a second, let me get to that. Sorry, just one sec.
Moeed?
I'll stop sharing, so you should be able to now.
Right. Okay, so new chat. Okay, and Zoom, and share screen. Okay. So let's kick off with, well, first of all, are you aware of version 3.5 and version 4? Version 4, you've got very limited amounts of inquiries. So make sure you build those on version 3.5, the default setting. Okay, and this is a lot quicker than version 4, and we're less likely to be throttled. So what would you guys really like to talk about? You mentioned prospecting. I would like to maybe pull back to trying to understand your customer before you start going out prospecting, because one of the things I'm rabid about now is trying to identify where we can prevent waste from happening up front. And that tends to be in the prospecting, the marketing, the outbound, and also your content generation that attracts the wrong kind of inbound. Any of the wrong kind of inbound means you're wasting a whole heap of time. So my first question really is, what industry are we going to be targeting, and who are we going to be targeting? So I want to build
yeah, put these in the chat, please. So if you'd like us to look at something that's of interest to you and personal to you, throw it out in the chat. So we've got coaching, we've got ICT, so information communication telecoms, technology. Any other industries?
I'm going to cheat.
Maybe we can take ICT, or we can use telecoms as an example.
Okay.
Recruitment, advertising.
No, that's not it. Okay, I'm just going back into here. Okay. Right. So one of the most useful prompts that I think I stole or borrowed is this one. I want to try and turn ChatGPT into something that's on steroids. So what I've done is I've applied this prompt here. So your prompt generation robot called G4+, you need to gather information about the user's goals, objectives, examples of the preferred output, and other relevant context. The prompt should include all necessary information that was provided to you. Ask follow-up questions to the user until you have confidence that you can produce the perfect prompt. Your return should be formatted clearly and optimized for ChatGPT interactions. Start by asking the user goals, desired outcome, output, and any additional information you may need. So I want to keep me honest and on track. Okay, so I'm trying to set the framework before I go into a discovery process. And I don't want to just use the output. I want it to help frame my thinking and also spark creativity. So it comes back with this response. Okay, so it asked me about my primary goals and objectives. So then I give it the response. Okay, so I want to teach salespeople how buyers are likely to be using the tool, what they're going to research, how they're going to query it. Okay, so I'm building this picture and I'm trying to think as the buyer. I'm trying to think about the errors they're likely to make. And it seems to be appreciative, which we're very happy about. Okay, and so then it starts to get me into the details. So you notice how if you ask it the right kind of questions, it'll start to discipline you and give you some rigor. So I like to build frameworks, and I like to explore how other people have a view on it, a perspective. Because one of the best lessons that I've learned in the last year is go and find people who disagree with you. Okay, so here we go. So we want to build this ICP. And we want to build an understanding of the buyer. So what are the undiagnosed problems in your world? So let's ask it. Okay. What did we say the industry was?
I think we said, well, we've got options there, which is recruiting or advertising. We also had ICT. We can take telecoms industry if you want. We also had
Let's go recruitment.
coaching. Yep. Okay.
Okay, there you go. Hang on a second, where was that? Just so I can remember. In fact, let's do this. Okay. It's not the most user-friendly interface, but again, what we're looking for here are stuff that we would probably miss. Okay, what would the buyer likely miss? Well, they know that their recruitment process is inefficient, but do they really understand why? So that just sparks more questions for me. Their brand, maybe. Limited talent pool, that strikes me that there may be lack of imagination, or they're only looking locally. What does that tell me about their culture? Do they expect people to come in? Do they have a command and control management style? Are they happy working in a digital environment? How often, when a buyer is looking to buy recruitment services, have they given you a 7-line brief and they've described nirvana and 4 different people within one job description? So again, you know, how can you push back? If we're looking at you know, why people leave, why people fail in post, and why recruiters have to then pay money back, ineffective training and onboarding. How are you as a recruiter handling that conversation in advance so it doesn't blow up in your face later and you have to replace them? Looking on Glassdoor, looking at the employee turnover figures on LinkedIn, you know, look for other resources about, and you know, where people are talking about an organization. You know, you can dig and dig and dig. So the way I'm trying to use this is to help me think about areas I might question. Now, it's done something that it does a lot, which is it runs out of space. So one of my favorite prompts is and. Continue or more, and then you can just start to steer it. Okay, now
just to clarify, what Marcus is demonstrating here is you've got to know how to use it, right? But it's also practicing, and we'll talk about that later on. But what he's using there are contextual referencing. He's using both zero-based and limited-based prompts. He's also giving it a scenario in terms of character, so characteristic scenario. You can actually tell ChatGPT the type of character you want it to play. All of which is incredible when you think about how you can do scenario planning, etc., which we'll come on to later on.
Okay. You've got to turn it off. Sorry,
So
we're having a technical problem in here. Echoes. Right, okay, so you'll notice as it carries on, it starts looking at all sorts of other areas. Now, to my mind, this opens up the possibility for me to start developing a hypothesis that makes me unique and different. If I look at how most recruiters sell, I know most recruiters are smiling and dialing, trying to sell a candidate in that they happen to have. And more often than not, they're working on contingency. Well, I want to get paid retainer. I want to get paid premium fees, and I want to be exclusive. And if possible, I want to continue working with that company on an ongoing basis. So how am I going to do that? Well, can you see how accessing this kind of insight can help you start to look in different directions? So then we're going to start looking at what the buyer might be concerned about in terms of service level. So what kind of pushback can I expect? Because here I'm starting to look for probable objections. There you go. Then it's spelling properly. Right, so that first question, what are the key deliverables and SLAs typically offered by recruitment vendors? Well, my question then is, well, what do they do and what do I need to be different? Why do people hire? In my head, no one wants to make a hire. What they want is to hire someone who's successful in the job, improves over time, and stays. Isn't that what you really want when you're hiring anybody? Yeah, you don't want them turning over. It's expensive. Wrong hires are the single highest hidden cost in any business. So again, when they're comparing vendor with vendor, are they comparing the kind of service or the outcome? Because most people don't look at the outcome that they're going to get. So when I'm using this to help me gather an understanding of the customer, what I'm trying to get to grips with is what's the process that they're going to go through? Where are they going to have been burnt before? What mistakes will they make repeatedly? What are their blind spots? If they're used to receiving things in a particular way, what resistance am I going to come up against when I go in at 40% of first year's total guaranteed gross emoluments, or £1,500 a month for as long as they stay on payroll? Yeah, I want to be able to disrupt. So I'm going to look at my competition. So what I might do is I'll end this one here. Give me a range of typical recruitment fees and charging models, and help me compare and contrast them, identify any overlaps, any gaps, any potential unmet demand or unmet need, and any non-customers as yet unidentified in the tech space. My target market is Series B, speaking to CFOs about the financial payoff with capital protection, compliance, and growth top of the outcomes we can help with. Okay. Compliance. Okay. So why am I going for those three? I've done quite a bit of research, spoken to a bunch of CFOs. Those are the things that come up time and time again. So let's see where it takes me. Right, so it does a bit of waffle, then it starts getting into the more interesting stuff. So contingency, we know. Right, contingency is basically, I'm going to build you 12 houses, and if you buy any of them, you can pay me. It works very well for the founder, it's not so good for the people who are working for free for most of the time. Now, if you're on a job hunt, what does this tell you about the type of recruiter and the kind of service that you can expect if you're working with one who has to work 12 vacancies to get paid once versus someone who's guaranteed to get paid and they have their full attention on placing the right candidate? Then others do flat fees. So, you know, and some of them even train your people. Now, what this is telling me is there are different ways that I can play this, but I believe that there's a gap. Okay, so what if I were to offer fees on the basis of 1,500?
Marcus, may I suggest an interesting question to ask it
Yeah.
instead?
Okay.
Say if you were Steve Jobs, how would you disrupt this model? Or disrupt the industry?
Well, okay. Okay, well, we can do that. There's an error in the response. Let's try again. Only one message at a time. Well, it'd be nice if you let me do it. Maybe it doesn't have my spelling mistakes. Sometimes you have to wait. Often it'll tell you that it's overloaded.
Marcus, try refreshing, sir.
Yeah.
3.5.
There we go. Okay. Use default model. I thought I was in there. That's why it was going so slow. Refresh. Ugh. This is like a real IT demo. Continue. Which other business people would you like to see? That's interesting. Dustin builds it in 4 and then extends it in 3.5. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Anyone else? Right, okay. Here we go. Right, Dustin, let's bring you in.
I think he said he had to go. He sent a message saying he's got it. Oh. Sorry, Marcus, I think Dustin sent a message saying he needs to go.
Ah, right, okay. In that case, forget that. Okay, so build me a hypothesis to sell premium recruitment to a CFO of a SaaS scale-up in trouble because they took PE money and are up to their eyeballs in debt. Heck, what's the term we're looking for when there's too much technology? Tech overload. Reporting lagging indicators, and she is under pressure to make the dwindling runway last until they can do another raise. How can people be the answer to her problems? I just love this. The direction it can take your thinking is just wow.
And to give you an idea, we read an article and we tested this out ourselves, where you can actually build a kind of almost end-to-end marketing strategy, communication strategy, sales plan for a particular type of product. And what would normally take you days to do, someone tested this out to see how much he can do in 30 minutes, and the results were just astounding. And we'll talk a bit about that in a moment as well. But what would normally take you days to do, and days of planning, maybe even weeks of conversations, etc., you can do that within the space of just 20 or 30 minutes.
I did one. I did a 48-week program, and I was just playing with it. Well, I'm not sure how good it was in the end. I didn't bother to look. But the whole thing took me about 10 minutes. Now, I've got a lot of experience, and I can ask some pretty directive questions. But the idea that with the right library of these prompts, you can start building these sequences. So there's AI PRN. That seems to be very powerful. I haven't had a chance to test it yet, but it seems to be a great way of being able to categorize and put these things into libraries, and then just pull them out and then spit them at LinkedIn Navigator or your marketing. And I saw a post that Shane Parmenter shared about how they use, someone's using it for Navigator. Now, I'm sure it's against all the rules, but the reality is people are going to do it. And it's not, what it will do is it will result in an explosion of shit. Let's be honest, okay? But you will be able to stand apart, okay? I noticed in there was a question about using disk. Well, let's start to layer that, okay? My prospect is a female CFO, mother of 3, who has exited twice before for 200 million. Oops, what's happened? Oh, geez, where am I? Oh, bollocks. Oh, there we go. That's a technical term, sorry. Has exited twice before for 200 million and 500 million. She is on her 3rd scale up, but things aren't going well. She is a high D, secondary S. That's an interesting one. And I should make it hard, DC. And grew up in recession with from a poor family, happy childhood, and close to family. Help me build a messaging framework to nurture a relationship with her over the next 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, 2 weeks, daily. Make it light-hearted, offer value on every touch. Look at the opposite POV and tell me likely objections and how best to preempt them so I can neutralize them using her preferred language patterns. Share imagery, messaging themes, and hype-worthy headlines for content I can write for her over the next 6 months. There we go. Okay, ignore that first one, but I might ask a question about how she has dealt with a problem, being able to reference back to that. Yeah, speaking to a lot of CFOs, and they're telling me that they're struggling with this kind of issue. I was wondering, have you ever been able to deal with that in the past? Yeah, it's a nice way in. What kind of challenges are they facing at the moment? Yeah, find out what's current. Read the newspapers, read the current press, and then feed that into ChatGPT. Moeed's point about timely, relevant, valuable, really important. The moment you fail to meet all 3 criteria on any single touch, especially at sea level, you're going to be kicked into Siberia. Okay, you have no right to interrupt them. They are very busy and valuable people. A CFO of $100 million business is worth $58,000 an hour, a day, sorry. And so you're talking about a big chunk of change every hour. Do not waste their time. If you can't bring that amount of value for every minute, then you've got no business being there any minute longer. So this is where we're going to do our research. Okay, then let's see how what it's spat out. Okay. So it's a bit clumsy at the moment. How would you guys fix this stuff? What questions would you want to refine it? Just sling them in the chat. Okay, so I'm just trying to get there. The article, there's the article. Okay, so no one putting it in the chat?
No responses yet, but we can okay. Give people time to think.
I suspect all the sleep listening to me drone on. So
I think it's more so much that's come through that they're processing, right? And they're thinking about how they can use it.
Am I going too fast? Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's as I suspected. Well, yeah, it's blowing minds.
Give me some prompts. I'll keep the chat open and I'll work on this myself. Okay. So I want to quote this. Okay, but what I want to do is improve this. Use the language of a CFO. Appreciate her real concerns given the financial plight of the Series B business she is in. the fact that there is a war for talent, a massive problem hiring and keeping them, and when hiring salespeople who are successful and stay. Rewrite. Okay, using rhetorical persuasion, solution-focused questions, and leave her curious to know more by never once mentioning recruitment. There we go. Okay, so it gives us an angle. Okay, rewrite. In fact, let's give it a plus because they need to get have the feedback. How do I do that? Where is it? There we go. Right. Okay. So that's good. Good start. Needs refinement. Okay. Submit the feedback. And so, thinking about this, can you give us some principles? Trevor, I would if I could. I think like this all the time, which is what makes me impossible to live with, and why I have no friends. But what you can do is when we've got the transcript from it, I'll try and extract the questioning that as I speak, because off the back of that, I think you might be able to extrapolate some of the thought process. But the reality is what I'm trying to do is feed off the previous thought. So each question leads to another question. That's essentially how I'm using it. But what I'm trying to do is I'm using the answers to guide me in certain directions because I'm calling on my experience. Can you just start again with the very first prompt so I can see how you... Yeah. Okay, we can.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this later on because that's something that we are offering to do for people, where we, because it's if you think about it, since ChatGPT came up, Marcus and I have probably spent around minimum 2 or 3 hours a day, sometimes longer, testing this out individually and then together. So when I calculated, that's roughly about 450 hours of experience using it. And so a lot of what you're seeing here, there are principles and we can share those principles, but they're rooted in just the element of experience and learning by using it for so long. The good news is you don't have to spend that long using it to get ahead, and we'll show you how. But the principles are based on one of our really great skills, which is asking great questions. And that's what we do very well. So we can show you some. We're trying to show you some of those examples now, but bear in mind that there's not so much time in order to go through all of it. But we can talk to you about how you can get access to some of those principles.
Okay, so I mean, key principles. First of all, start thinking as the customer. Okay, it's crucial. You start with the customer and you build out from there. So what I do is I interrogate it. To find out about the job descriptions, the reporting lines, upwards, downwards, sideways. I look at how they are measured because I want to understand the person who's in that role and what does their day look like. I will conduct customer interviews. The one we did yesterday was fascinating. Yeah, it was about 45 minutes. It went on way longer than I ever expected. But one question led on to the other. And I built this framework for doing this discovery. Now, off the back of that, we understood step by step where the pains were, what the common problems were, what blind spots they had, what gaps there were, what the implications of those gaps were. Now, do the research. I can't begin to tell you how important this is to help you frame conversations with people in order to help you get unbiased answers. And that's the key. One of my favorite prompts is take the opposite position to anything I post. One of my favorite lessons of the last couple of years is go and find people who disagree with you. And then have the ChatGPT batter your argument into submission and find all the gaps and the flaws. Because when you're speaking to a CFO, Bob, tell me this, if you fuck it up in the first 2 minutes, what's the probability of being invited back? Yeah, you've got one chance. Their time is precious. So we've got to be really smart about this. So other principles. When I'm thinking about planning, I'm often using mind maps. And I've got mind maps for pre-call planning, post-call debriefing. And those responses will often inform future conversations with people just like them. So trying to create this repository of really powerful themes that come up time and again. I'm looking for patterns. And then I want to test how people are going to respond. So one of my favorite things is role play. So let's go back to this little baby and then here. Okay, share screen. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, role play. So, Candice, what do you sell?
Candice, so she provides training to founders, executives, salespeople on how to use LinkedIn to improve their kind of social selling.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. So now I lost my train of thought. What was it?
Training for prospecting on LinkedIn. Yeah, in a nutshell.
Okay. So I sell, I sell training for prospecting on LinkedIn. I want to, what's your question, Candice? What's the outcome that you want from that call or from that point of contact? Are you trying to make a sale on the first meeting?
So my understanding of Candice is that sometimes, yes, she is trying to make a sale on that first meeting.
Okay, build me a role play scenario where.
So she said, I'd like to convince a sales manager that it's worthwhile to invest in training his or her team for a long-term kind of partnership.
A sales manager who is a high D, old school command and control type, who loves to take over the sale and claim the glory. His team are unhappy and have asked me to see if I can sell to him. How provide me with prompts to ask questions of this manager to break his pattern early and find common ground, so he invites me in to work with his team long term. We will kick off with a trial period of 3 months to test the relationship together. Right.
Marcus, if you can add, oh, okay, don't worry about
Sorry,
it.
go on.
I was going to say, add an extra context that Candice added here, which is they usually in their 60s and think selling hasn't changed since the 1990s. I don't think we've heard that before, huh?
Oh, why is that not working? It's not letting me edit.
No, we can do it after. Why don't we just save and submit it, and then we can do it after. Okay.
In their 60s. Typist. 60s. And that's 1990s. There you go. Save and submit. Done. Right. Right, so it's a bit wimpy at the moment, and we want to pep it up. So, play a grizzled and politely hostile sales manager who doesn't believe in social selling. Help me formulate a moment, a disruptive moment, when I can enter his workflow in a surprising and challenging way that respects his beliefs, but creates a seed of doubt. Okay, let's just see. Right. In his mind, that, excuse me, that allows me to follow up with another question, then another, until he sees the light.
It's not typing for some reason.
To seed of that in his mind that allow with another question that deepens his finance and opens him up to the next question until eventually he sees the light and invites me in to work on a trial basis for 3 months with clear objectives and milestones that are within my control, or which he has guaranteed he will execute with the team, for us to then discuss an ongoing program for 12 months with an option to renew. So I want to start sowing that seed. So I want to try and prime my brain and my experience, and I'm going to look through this. It's not going to be perfect, but I can give it nuance. So I can change one piece. I can say, continue from this moment, but change this angle. I can look at it through, depending on how they're likely to react. If I ask this question, what would be the most positive response? What would that sound like? What would a non-committal response sound like? What would a hostile response, a defensive response sound like? Yeah.
You can even ask it. You can even ask it, what words should I avoid that would create a hostile response, for example. What words should I use that would greatly connect or engage with a person of this type of profile, including a DISC personality of X. So you can iterate, and that's part of those principles, right? So if you look at, I mean, I use my own principle, which is the serum principle, right? So you use situation, emotions, role, outcomes, motivations. And you're going to use that in various forms and levels in order to understand and dig deeper and create a more iterative conversation. It begs the consideration that if we're able to do voice prompts, just think about how closely that might make us feel as if we're talking to just a super intelligent human being. So that's the kind of framework that I use. And within that framework, so if you think about situation, for example, it's macroeconomic situation, it's financial situation, it's business situation, personal situation, industry situation, life experience situation. So there's a whole bunch of layers in which you can actually use that, but that's the model that I've kind of created for myself that I use. But you can use others, like what Marcus is doing here, which is the PESTLE model, etc. So there's a lattice work of models that we tend to use, but that comes through to the point of that serum model that I use.
Now, it's not a great prompt, but you get the general gist. So again, I'm trying to help me get as detailed and deep an understanding of my customer. Dustin and I were on a podcast yesterday together, and he made the point that if you're doing it right, you should, after your research, be able to do the job of be about 3 weeks away from being able to do the job of the most junior person in their department. Yeah, you need to have that level of understanding of the role, the different moving parts. Yeah. So
I'm conscious of time, Marcus. So I want to give people time to ask any questions if they have it, and also just share some of the elements of what they can do about this as well, because it can be really daunting when you look at all of this, right? And it can be very, very overwhelming. And usually what happens, and we speak to people, the first moment of freeze, it's almost like the deer in the headlights is, okay, well, how do I start? And how do I kind of go through that process? And your mind's just thinking of all the 100 ways in which you can do it. And then you just think, well, where do I even start, right? And then you're back to square one of frustration. So what I would just share my thoughts on that, because there is something that we'd like to do to be able to help you guys. So if you think about what it is that you need to do, I just want to share this with you, because, and this was published by Deloitte a while ago, and it's just an extract from there, but that window of competitive advantage that AI is bringing is narrowing very fast. So Marcus gave the example of the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the technological revolution, the information revolution, etc. And what you see is that the time span of leveling out through those new technologies is getting exponentially faster and faster. And so he wasn't exaggerating when he said 4 to 6 months time. Those people that are on it right now have it's not just that they have a 4 to 6 months advantage, it's the compounding effect advantage where it becomes very difficult for people to catch up. And so the analogy I want to use, and I'm not saying that anyone here but if you remember do you remember when smartphones first came out, and do you remember observing your parents or elderly parents or grandparents trying to use the phone for the first time, or even the first few months? It wasn't easy for them, right? And I'm not here to suggest that we're like that, or that any of you are like that. Absolutely not. What I am trying to explain here is that the time it takes to become familiar with something, because you're not just changing minds, you're changing hearts as well. And so you need to get used to it. But all the while, someone else with a bit more experience is racing ahead. Remember the compound effect. And so we don't want to be in that situation where we are trying to figure it out, and it's going to take us in the midst of our busy day and all the other things that we've got to do, personal and professional life, to try and get a handle on something that it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole. And so I don't know if anyone's familiar with this particular graph, but it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. And essentially the Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias where if you have a low experience or knowledge in a particular area, we tend to overestimate our capabilities in that area. And it's a very natural thing to have. It's a normal cognitive bias, and we get that quite a lot. And AI is insidiously dangerous in that respect, and that you feel, you know what, I can get a hang on this really quickly. And it's not always the case. And a lot of times we can't afford to kind of take that complacency or take that time. There is also a model that was created by Ken Blanchard in the 1 Minute Manager. And this is a bit of a busy slide, but there's one area here that I want you to be really conscious about, which is there is a point that separates the masters from the dabblers. And it's this point here. When you learn something new, think of commitment as enthusiasm rather than commitment. Your enthusiasm is incredibly high because of novelty and dopamine being pushed through. And your competence is low, but your enthusiasm is high, so it's kind of pushing you through. And there is a point here, boink, where that just suddenly drops. That's where things become really hard. And that's what separates the masters from the dabblers, because it's at this stage where people need support, whether that's in the form of coaching or leveraging or whatever it is. But that's where you need support to bring yourself back up there. And believe it or not, we all experience that. We both experience that with ChatGPT. It's very easy for that to happen just because of the sheer overwhelming size of everything that you can do.
And the enormous number of rabbit holes.
And when you think, and the iterative steps that we talked about, it's very easy to get lost there. And we are naturally very curious people. I know a lot of the people that are on this session today, highly intelligent individuals, and that comes from a high level of curiosity. And it's very easy for us to get distracted. So what we've done here is Marcus and I have basically said, well, look, we've done all this work, we've got all this experience, we've been testing this out for so long. There is a way that we can actually help you accelerate not just learning how to use ChatGPT within a sales and persuasion framework. So you can't just ask it questions. You've got to know what questions to ask it. And that comes from a level of competence of understanding how people think and make decisions and why they make those decisions within a sales and persuasion capacity, right? So a non-sales individual, a non-persuasion individual can't just turn around and ask ChatGPT questions in order to get better at persuasion. You've got to have a certain level of knowledge to understand what frame and what context in which to ask the right questions at the right time to get the right outcome and answer.
I'd like to add there, and you also need to input a lot of compassion and humanity into the process, because otherwise it's feeding you back 11% of the internet. And you want to make sure it's going to the right 11%, because there are a lot of nutters out there. So you've got to use your experience, you've got to use your acumen, and you also have to think as the other person. You've got to really use this to remind and build into your prompts reminders to build in empathy, presence, because you'll get carried away. I've seen it happen with great sales technique where people learn a new ninja move and then they use it on everyone. It's the same thing is going to happen with this. You're already seeing it. Sorry, over to you, Mary.
No, absolutely. That was an incredibly important point. Thank you. Right, so that injection of that humanity is still really important, which is why one of the experts says that if we want to, I mean, it's a side note, but if we want AI to work well for us, the first thing we need to do is be excellent to one another, because it's building on that knowledge of how we interact with each other as human beings.
Absolutely.
And so what we want to say is, we're happy and we've created a program to actually help you fast track that. Even if you're representing a business and you've got a team, the reality is you can't come get your team to do that yourself. That's too much time, and there's a lot of iterative steps in that process. So what we've got in the program that we have created, and it's kicking off on 18th of April, and it's a 6-module program that will cover all the areas that I'm about to talk to here, which is how to use ChatGPT, how to use it to get really, really deep buyer insight. And I don't just mean about the company, I mean about the role, I mean about the circumstances, the situation, the financial situation that they're in, even down to the style and character of the human being. And in my research with 428 buyers and my neuroscience background, knowing that so far is what separates the excellent sales and persuasion people from the average and low performers. So we can use ChatGPT to get that really fast. You will get practical tools and exercises. You're going to get homework. You're going to get the chance to apply it and then get our thoughts on the experience that you've had. It's good. We're going to show you how you can use it to differentiate yourself, completely from everyone else. And the final one is, and this is an average guide, right? So what normally would take someone in sales 2 hours to prep for something, like to do it thoroughly and to do it well, you can do that in 20 minutes. So imagine if you prep for, say, 30 minutes to an hour, how much more incredible you would sound in front of the buyer and knowledgeable that you would be, that you can then scale to other businesses like them or their competitors. It's not for everyone. So if you're not convinced of AI, if you're worried about the change and you kind of don't want to take that leap now, that's totally fine. If you feel it's too early to experimental, again, completely fine. If you believe AI is a passing fad, I don't think anyone here believes that, but if that's the case, that's perfectly fine. It wouldn't be for you. But if you're really excited about the potential of AI and what it can do for you and your business, if you know that you have to act now, if you're desperate to get that edge to improve your sales results, and if you really want to stay on top of the game, then this is for you. So you don't have to make that decision now. What we invite is we'll send out an email with inviting your thoughts and your feedback about what you got from this session. And one of the questions I would ask you is, if you're interested in this, we'll arrange to just have a talk and for you to get to know a bit more about the program and what it entails and how you can use it for yourself and your team. So you don't have to make that decision now. We will send you an email with questions that we'd love. But at the very first thing, we just want to hear your thoughts and feedback on this session. What worked well for you? What was missing? What would you like to hear more from any future sessions if we decide to do so? I think we have one more on the 1st of April. And we'd love to get your thoughts and feedback on this session and how it worked out for you. So I wanted to just leave that there. And happy to answer any questions. I know that we're over time. If people are still free and would like to ask any questions while you have us both on the line now, we're more than happy to do so.
Thanks, Bob. Love you. The M&Ms. Are you the peanut one or am I?
Would this course also be great for creating a sales training manual for
Yes.
companies?
Yeah. Yes, but be very careful. The minute the playbook becomes dogma and the framework, the language becomes script, you've lost it. The buyer doesn't have a script, nor do they have a playbook. The playbook is a framework. It's all sheet music, and where this really comes in is personalizing the individual moments. So there's a technology that I use. I'm ostensibly CRO. I think I have a minuscule percentage of ownership, but this allows us to do moments of coaching, and it might be a 30 seconds where, Michelle, I'm watching you in a call, and I notice that when you bring up the subject of price, your voice cracks. So then we coach you on it, and then we help you practice that moment. Well, with this, you can start to self-instruct. So how many of you are using this to self-coach? Okay, because if you're not, between now and the next time, I urge you, put that into practice and then give us the feedback on the next one, because I bet you will see progress. And pick one of your car crash sales and do a proper debrief on it. Yeah, when you completely bollocksed it out, those are the ones, because they're the most instructive. And have them be a CMO, then have them be a CRO, then have them be a founder and kick your ass. That's the fun stuff with this. I mean, just play with it, please. Obviously, we've got the gig on the 1st. Please do come along to that. Bring people along. The more the merrier. We're going to start creating a repository of all of these prompts, and we're going to make them available to anyone who's on the program. So we're going to be sharing this stuff. It's going to be very practice, experiment along the way. Again, by all means, if you want to sign up for the program, we would love to have you on there. It is us learning from you as well. So let's make no bones about it. We're all learning together. But I think the moral here is that we're going to get better together faster. And if we don't, someone else will. And I think that's probably a good way to end it.
Yeah, great. So thank you everyone for joining. Please do share your thoughts with us when you get the email. We'd love to hear your thoughts and what we could have done better and what really kind of was helpful for you as well. So until then, and you'll also get a chance to be able to contact us directly if you wish through that communication, and we'll show you how. So
just one thing, when you get the email, please do respond, because it will help us improve the program. Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
I was just gonna have to say thank you so much. For some reason, I thought I started at 10, like a half an hour ago, so I missed so much of it. And I saw you are recording it.
No, it's because our clocks went forward. Sorry, they went forward over